All right, what's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with Kingdom Come Part 2. Yes, we are, Part Dos. Now, here's the thing. Superman and the Justice League, as we know them, have effectively returned, right? Superman, Wonder Woman, Hawkman, all these different characters, they've all basically returned back to the landscape. So, what we're looking at now is a scenario where the superheroes of old have returned to face the superheroes of new. Now, this is where things get really, really interesting, because on the surface, we would look at that and we would say, okay, so like the day saved and everything's going to be sorted out. We're pretty far from that, actually, and things are going to get a lot worse before they get better. So what this does is it initially picks up at the Statue of Liberty, and you've basically got this crazy guy, right? Like the American Commando, and his Minutemen is what he calls him. Now, the thing about this here is he just kind of goes on this just ultra, I wouldn't even call it patriotic, so much as just ultra insane rant where he says like, this is my country, right? For years, the American Commando and the Minutemen have protected the US from foreign threats, only to have overlooked the most insidious menace of all, the poor, tired, huddled masses camping on our shores, begging for citizenship. You immigrants dare expect sanctuary? America's not as big as it used to be. For God's sakes, Kansas is gone. We can't house you now. We can't even feed you now. But still, you force yourselves on us. Well, no more. Today, the Americommando declares war on the wretched refuse. And at that point, you basically have all these guys who start attacking these people who were looking to make their way into the United States. Now, while all that goes on, what you have is another of these really just anti-hero groups out there that just attacks the Americommandos. And again, as we talked about before, what you have here in this instance are basically feral superheroes. It's the best way to look at it. That traditionally in DC Comics, the emergence of Superman, well, he didn't really present himself as the de facto leader and the standard by which all superheroes should follow. It just kind of ended up that way. The Superman's morale was almost unquestionable and incorruptible. What you have here are basically people with powers and no leadership whatsoever, right? It's an answer to the question, what will people do in a circumstance when there is no one to lead them? They'll do whatever it is that they want to do. And the rules or any collateral damage won't really make any difference. It's a really, really interesting critique on people who are like, we should not have an ordered government. Okay, well, if you look at the nature of humanity, what is the average person without someone telling them what to do or where to go? They're people who just do things arbitrarily and never take into account the wants or desires or the consequences of their actions on other people. It just becomes lawlessness, and it'll only lead to chaos and destruction. And so it's really, really interesting how this is critiqued, how that concept is looked at and put through the lens of these superheroes, because what you get is in the middle of all this, you have the Justice League that arrives here. Now, contrary to what you might think in the sense of Superman and them just show up and start pummeling everybody, while they do bring an end to this fight, what Superman does is he basically presents himself and the Justice League to these people and basically gives them an option, right? You can join us or you can be dealt with. Now, there is a way in which they're dealt with, and that way doesn't necessarily come until, well, really towards, in this story, but it's one of those things where Superman's hand is kind of forced. Instead, what he does is he kind of repairs the Statue of Liberty as best he can, kind of presenting himself as a beacon of hope, and then in turn, basically uses the numbers of all these vigilantes and brings them to his side. Now, that's an important distinction that I want to make here. When it comes to these different heroes out here, again, they're not really villains. They're more just feral, like they've never really had any direction. They've never been taught any better. One of the things to know and what's kind of interesting is this book in a lot of ways throws into sharp relief the idea of like social constructs, different things like that. Like if you scale out, right, if you look at like how people function on a day-to-day life or look at your life and then you scale out and look at it at a macro scale, we as human beings largely just do things because that's just what you're supposed to do. We don't question it. We don't really ask why. We just do it because everybody else does. That social norms and social constructs are largely just created in order to provide a sense of comfort, and that anybody who deviates outside of these unspoken social norms has to be quote unquote corrected and brought back in again, even if what we're doing is entirely stupid and ridiculous and doesn't really make any sense. A really good example of this is the Mitch Hedberg joke, right? That like escalators that are broken are basically just stairs. So why would you be an idiot and take stairs instead of taking the escalator, right? But we don't think about that. We're just like, oh, the escalator's not working. I'll take the stairs instead, even though that's basically stairs. And we all do that. And so that's why it's kind of interesting when somebody just sort of looks up and says, why am I doing this, right? Because the response of everybody around them is, shut up, stop asking questions, get your head back down. And then they just continue on just like they did before, right? So, violating social norms is kind of looked down upon, which really kind of makes you beg the question, who's the one that really is screwed up here? Is it the one who's asking the question, why am I following these social norms? Or is it the one who's telling that person to stop asking questions and to follow those social norms? But the thing about this is that these heroes don't have a leader. There's no one out there for, to really tell them, here is how heroes are supposed to act. They're feral. And so Superman presenting himself in this way is quite literally giving these people the kind of, person to follow, or the kind of ideology to a degree. Now, you're going to find over the course of this that there is a lot of hypocrisy that goes on there and a lot of things that don't necessarily seem to make sense. But following all of that, Superman and his guys, the Justice League, appear basically before the United Nations at a kind of press conference. And they say, look, like, we've been gone for a really long time, right? A lot of you, or at least some of you all, may remember who we are. Some of you may not. But the fact that we've been gone, that's our mistake. And he says, in our absence, a new breed of metahumans has arisen, a vast phalanx of self-styled heroes unwilling to preserve life or defend the defenseless, a legion of vigilantes who have perverted their great powers, who have forsworn the responsibilities due to them. We have returned to teach them the meaning of truth and justice. Together, we will guide this new breed with wisdom and, if necessary, with force. Above all, we will restore order. We will make things right again. Now, there is an attempt by various members of the press to ask some questions, but for the most part, they're not necessarily answered. There is a point when Superman is asked, well, what if this leads to you having to face Magog? To which Superman just kind of looks away and seems to avoid the question, and then basically just ends up taking off. Now, one of the things that we are kind of given here, and at least, we're given this kind of moment where Superman transitions to Wayne Manor. Of course, we knew it was only going to be a matter of time before he would confront Bruce Wayne. And this interaction between the two is really, really cool, because when Superman gets there, Wayne Manor's trashed. I mean, this place is just torn up. I mean, obviously, it's just experienced some pretty rough times. And Superman finds Batman down in the cave. But one of the things to notice here is that there is no happiness from Batman to see Superman. And in fact, this exchange is phenomenal, because what you have here is Superman who says, Batman, I know you're here, right? Like, you cannot hide from me. And the response of Batman is, I bow to your superior wisdom. After all, you know all about hiding, don't you, Clark? And it's one of those things where Batman holds a lot of animosity towards Superman. Now, what's interesting here is that the debate between the two is that Superman has always believed that mankind should be led to a better future, right? If the world becomes a better place, it's because Superman and the actions of the superheroes show humanity that they can become better. But you could argue that's a very naive perspective, right? That Superman is John Turturro from Miller's Crossing, right? When you have Gabriel Byrne with a gun pointed at his head, and Superman says, look into your heart, right? That's what he is. Whereas Batman is the realist, right? Batman looks at humanity and says, no, if given the opportunity, humanity will just do crazy and violent things. I mean, look at these vigilantes that exist out there. They're an answer to your question, Superman. What is humanity at its core? What will humanity become when you take away consequences? It's the grocery carts litmus test. For those of you guys who are unfamiliar with that, the grocery cart litmus test is this really, really fascinating ideology. What it says is that when you go to the grocery store and you buy your groceries and you put them in the cart and then you put them in the car and so on and so forth, and you're done, the grocery cart is sitting right there. And that's when the test comes into play, right? There's no reward for putting the grocery cart back inside the cart corral, if that's what it's called. I don't know what it's actually called, but there's no reward for doing that, but it is the right thing to do. However, if you don't do that and you just leave the grocery cart out there in the middle of the parking lot, there's no punishment for that. So what will a person do when there's no reward for doing the right thing, but no punishment for doing the wrong thing? What will they end up doing here? And the argument that Batman's making here, albeit absent the grocery cart litmus test, although I would love to have seen that in the comic, is he says, the world in which you see, Clark, is the answer to that question. The world that you see out there, that's what it looks like. When you have metahumans where there's no consequences for doing the wrong thing, but no benefit for doing the right thing outside of a, moral pat on the back, they'll do whatever they want to do. And that right and wrong won't matter anymore. Right and wrong are completely and totally irrelevant. There's just simply what a man can do and what a man can't do. And that's it. Those are the only rules that apply here. So you championing how great humanity can become, the evidence runs contrary to everything that you believe. And that's why Batman Superman had basically turned Gotham City into what's essentially a dictatorship, right? Where he rules it with an iron fist. Now, there's a few different reasons why this had happened. The first one is because once Batman's identity became publicly known, Bane and Two-Face showed up and just wrecked Wayne Manor. Now, of course, they weren't able to access the Batcave, hence the reason why all this stuff is still intact. The other reason why is because there came a point where essentially Arkham Asylum was just annihilated, and basically all the villains that were in it were basically killed. So there's very few of any of Batman's traditional villains left, if any at all. Instead, now it's all just sort of metahumans that are there. The metahumans, those ones that just kind of do whatever it is that they want, presumably dealt with Batman's villains. But the reality is that in the absence of all that, the Gotham City in the eyes of Bruce Wayne is a utopia. There is no crime, none of that stuff. Now, people don't necessarily have the same free will that they had before, but as we've seen so far with regards to all these metahumans, what will people do with complete and total freedom? They'll go crazy, right? They'll basically destroy things. That right and wrong simply won't matter. It's a really, really interesting idea here, and I love the way that this is put together. And so that's where you have just kind of a splitting of ideologies here, that at the end of the day, there is no real way to find any measure of unification. And in fact, Batman even goes as far as to tell Superman, you are just as naive as you ever were. Like, you really believe that humanity's this great thing, but rest assured, right? Like, there's myself and the people I work with whose names you will never know. We see humanity for what it really is. And what you see here in Gotham City, we will try to extend this to the rest of the world, because humanity by its very nature needs to be controlled. If there's no one telling people where to go or what to do, then people will be lost. They'll be just chaotic and nonsensical, right? They'll do things that are quite literally worse for society, because whether or not something's better for society won't matter to them. They'll operate on their own selfish instincts. The world has shown us that. Humanity has shown us that. So we have to control them because they cannot control themselves. Now, initially, Superman ends up leaving. Instead of just creating a confrontation with Batman, he basically walks away. And you end up finding out that the various people that Bruce Wayne has on his side include people like Ted Cord and Dinah Lance and Oliver Queen, that these are some pretty intelligent and capable forces that are out there. More so than that, what Batman also says is, with the Justice League returned and the Justice League reforming, what Superman's going to do is all those different metahumans out there who are just rogue and doing their own thing, it's only going to be a matter of time before they basically join his ranks, which means the ranks of the Justice League are going to bolster, which means we have to find our own team. We have to build our own team up. This includes people like Black Adam. It includes people like Dr. Fate and so on and so forth. We've got to build our own team. And so what you end up getting is this moment where as time goes on, you have Superman who is meeting with different groups out there, right? These metahumans and whatnot who are just rampaging and causing all kinds of problems and whatnot, and basically teaching them direction. Now, not all of them join the side of Superman, and we're not really given an immediate answer as to what it is that happens to them. Instead, for the most part, the ones who do agree with Superman basically join his side. But what we end up doing is transitioning to another group out there, which is basically called the Mankind Liberation Front. And what this is a coming together of humans across the world. Now, one of the funny things here is, despite its name, not all of them are directly tied to humanity. I mean, they are, but they also kind of have powers essentially, so you could argue metahumans. And the reason why I say this is because one of the first people that we're met with is Vandal Savage. Now, depending on how you want to look at DC's history, you could take that traditional history of Vandal Savage as it exists regarding Dionysium and the substance he consumed that basically made him immortal. You could apply that to Kingdom Come if you want to and say, in this alternate reality, that's basically how he came to be. Of course, that whole Dionysium thing was established in the New 52 Batman run by Scott Snyder. Vandal Savage is not just a guy who's going to live for like probably 85 to 90 years and then die of age. He's immortal. But regardless, this Mankind Liberation Front is headed up by Lex Luthor, and you have a few different people here, one of whom is Al Zufash, who's basically the successor to Ra's al Ghul. Then you also have, of course, Lord Naga, you've got Selina Kyle, you've got the Riddler, Edward Nygma, and the cool thing is that what you find is that behind the scenes with a lot of things that's going on, the Mankind Liberation Front is actually working to make life more difficult for humanity. And I know it seems counterintuitive that they're doing things like impeding rescue efforts, right? Or they're getting in the way of food and resources that are being brought to the United States from different places and so on. And so when the question's being asked, how is any of this helping humanity, which is the charter under which you operate, the response of Lex Luthor is simply no pain, no gain. He says, our objective is to heighten the tension between humans and metahumans, to bring it to a head so that humans have no choice but to reclaim the being of world power, regardless of the cost. There will be war, bloodshed, but in the end, mankind will once again rule the earth. Now, the reason why he says that, of course, obviously he wants it to be him and this council that rules everything, but the reason why he makes this argument is because for years, what has happened is humanity has handed the reins over to superheroes to keep them protected. That's the way it was when you initially had the Justice League. It's the way it was when the Justice League disbanded and we got this new generation of heroes. Humanity ultimately bit off more than they could chew. They regretted the decision they made, but there was no one willing to step up and save humanity from itself. Now that the Justice League has returned, humanity hasn't changed. It's not doing anything different than it was before. It's not like the reformation of the Justice League led to humanity saying, oh my God, I see the light. We clearly made a mistake by looking at superheroes and asking them to save us. No, it was humanity looking at the Justice League and saying, man, the world's such a terrible place. Save us, Justice League. Show us a better way. And then when humanity made the decision that it made, which is what we'll talk about later on in the story, the Justice League disbanded. And the anti-heroes that rose up, humanity was like, yes, you're the ones we want. And then when the anti-heroes did exactly what they would do, which was showing really in a lot of ways becoming a mirror for humanity itself, that humans were just like, no, we don't want this. This is not what we wanted. We want the Justice League back. So the Justice League came back and they're like, Justice League, these metahumans are going crazy. You have to save us. So it's one of those things where humanity never quite takes responsibility for itself. It never looks around at any point and says, maybe I'm the one responsible for all of this. Instead, it just blames everything else on everybody else. And so the idea of the Mankind Liberation Front is to force the hand of humanity, to make things so dire that what the majority of the human race does, right? What people in general do is they look at metahumans and say, metahumans in their entirety are the problem. Metahumans are the reason why all of this is the way it is. We have to get metahumans, we have to get rid of them completely. And then once that's done, that will lead to humanity re-inheriting the earth, quote unquote, as Lex Luthor puts it. Now, the other part of this is that Lex does have an ace up his sleeve. It's one thing to interrupt trade routes and to make resources more scarce. It's another to actually be able to stand against Superman and the Justice League. What we end up finding out here is the ace in the hole that Lex Luthor has is actually Shazam. But before we figure that out, before we find out about that, what we end up doing here is basically picking up with a point where Superman and Wonder Woman go to visit Aquaman. Now, initially they ask Aquaman for aid, but the reality here is Aquaman's like, no. Look, I'm not helping you guys at all. One, I never really wanted to be Aquaman. I never wanted to be your Aquaman. I was there more or less because I wanted to ensure Atlantis was protected and because I didn't even really initially know what you guys were about, right? So in a lot of ways, for those of you guys coming from Marvel, it was when Black Panther initially joined the Avengers, he joined them to keep an eye on them, not because he actually wanted to be a part of the team and because he believed in their cause. As time went on, Aquaman did to a degree, but the reality here is that when the time came when it was obvious the Justice League wasn't going to reform, Superman was done, he had walked away, and there would be no one there to look out for Atlantis, that Aquaman's response was, I'm gonna look after my kingdom myself. Whatever happens in the surface world, I don't care, so long as it doesn't impede here. Now, this is in reality, and it's one of the things that Wonder Woman points out, it really is Aquaman sticking his head in the sand and just waiting for the danger to pass, or hoping the danger passes. The question she has is, how long do you think this chaos on the surface will take before it comes down here to the oceans? And the response of Aquaman is, well, if that time comes, then I will deal with it then. But that's if that time comes. At the moment, I don't really care. It's not my concern here. And so it's a pretty significant moment because one of the things that we learn is that Wonder Woman had basically been banished from Themyscira. She's not allowed back anymore, that she's lost her title of princess, that the reality here is that with Themyscira, when she had left that place and gone out into the world, she was supposed to be an ambassador and she was supposed to make the world a better place, but she never did. She's not welcome back anymore. And so she's no longer the person that we knew. But one of the other things that goes on is you have this moment where Superman actually finally tracks down, or really it's more like Speedy, he finally tracks down Magog, and then he actually travels to meet him. Now, in a lot of ways, it's one of these things that's fearful because what this does is it tells us how things got this bad, why the Justice League disbanded, why Superman basically quit, the whole 9 yards. That what Magog is doing is he's actually out in Kansas, seemingly trying to rebuild to a degree. And that's when Superman asks, like, what are you doing out here? And you kind of have this moment where Magog basically kind of pokes fun at him, right? Just sort of rustles his feathers a little bit, gives him a bit of a hard time. Superman's not necessarily having it, but the Magogs was like, don't you remember? Like, you're the one who caused all this, right? Like, you're the reason why things are the way they are. And that's when we end up getting this bit of a flashback. And what we find out is that at some previous point in time, the Joker had shown up to the Daily Planet in Metropolis and massacred everybody. 92 men and Lois Lane one woman. And the result of that is that with her being killed along with Jimmy Olsen and everybody else, that the Joker was captured and the Joker was put on trial. But before the trial could actually take place, Magog showed up and killed the Joker. And instead of humanity condemning this action and saying that's a problem, humanity cheered the action on. They were like, yes, the Joker had to go. The Joker had to die. And what this did is it led to Superman becoming disheartened by the fact that everybody was okay with it. The Magog was eventually arrested, and then when he was put on trial, he was acquitted. And so it was essentially humanity saying, we're okay with the fact that a metahuman took the law into their own hands and killed a villain. We don't really believe in truth and justice anymore. We believe in doing whatever it takes to win. Now, the reality is that really is what it takes. That really is the case. There are some people out there that just have to die. The result of this is what you had, or really the bigger issue that you had here, is that the Magog wasn't really any measure of a leader himself. He was just a guy out there with power. And so when he killed the Joker and became the kind of face of this new generation of superheroes, and Superman abandoned his role and the Justice League disbanded as well, it left the stage open for all these metahumans to rise. Now that's the big difference there. I do champion the idea that there are some people out there where the world would just be better off without them. That as a society, you have to create a kind of structure, right? That you can't have this kind of open-ended idea where it's like everybody can do whatever they want to that makes them happy, you know? Like you do have to have a rigid and firm structure on how society functions. Otherwise, you start running into all kinds of problems. And yes, like Magog killing the Joker isn't him crossing a line, sure. But if this was like Superman who had done it or something like that, things could potentially turn out different. Now I know a lot of people are gonna say like, but Rob, injustice, so on and so forth. Superman was right in injustice. He was 100% right. Humanity couldn't be trusted to make the world a better place. So Superman had to do it for them. That if Superman didn't step in and do that, humanity would have eventually wiped out the whole world. And of what use is freedom to a society that will use that freedom to destroy itself? I would say freedom is useless at that point. And so the thing about this is that you have this kind of situation where ultimately the Magog comes clean. I don't know why I keep saying the Magog, but Magog, I think it's because I'm used to saying the Man-Gog from the Thor comics at Marvel. But Magog comes clean. And what's been happening is he has this enormous weight that he carries around because he never wanted this. He never wanted to be the face of some new generation of vigilante that showed up and turned the world into a hellhole. He never wanted to be that. He never wanted the entire destruction of Kansas. That's never what he wanted here. And so what he tells Superman is, I'm sorry, right? Like this is all your fault. You were supposed to be better than us. You were supposed to be great. You were supposed to be the one that showed us a better way. You weren't supposed to quit. You were supposed to show me what I was doing wrong. You were supposed to guide us. At a time when the world really actually needed you, you quit. You gave up. And so he says, like, I'm tired of dealing with all these ghosts that haunt me, all these, like a million ghosts, all these people in Kansas that haunt me, punish me, lock me away, kill me, just make the ghosts go away, right? Make my guilty conscience disappear. And that's when Superman tells Wonder Woman, we are at war. And the reason why this matters is because Wonder Woman, having been a warrior and so on and so forth, the big concern of the Spectre and Norman McKay is that if anybody was going to push Superman over that edge and send him into a place where he would potentially become a dictator, it would be Wonder Woman. Because when you're a hammer, everything is a nail. And so when you're Wonder Woman and all you live to do is fight and like defeat the enemy, the idea of things like nuance, right? The idea of not everybody is an inherent bad guy and not everybody needs to be treated the same way, that kind of thing goes away. Now, to a degree, that's true. Treating people decently does not mean treating people equitably. That if you are a person who has known nothing but war and conflict, if someone showed up to you with a kind and caring and gentle hand, you would likely see them as being weak, because the defining attribute of what makes a person strong is whether they can withstand and cope with that war-type environment, right? Physical and emotional and mental strength. That's what defines a valuable person. You would see that kind person as being weak. Whereas if you are someone who comes from a kind and gentle place, you would look at somebody who uses overbearing force to get their point across as somebody who's inherently weak, because you value strength through kindness and compassion. So again, one of the things that Wonder Woman doesn't really seem to have a good grasp of is the nuance of that. Everything can be treated the same way. So that's going to be an element that's actually going to be very, very important as all of this goes on. But one of the things that Superman does here is he actually travels to Apokolips, which is the realm of Darkseid, to visit with Orion. Now, this is kind of a small little deviation here, right? Kind of a small little thing. It's not a great big huge moment. And in fact, word had reached the ears of Superman that basically Darkseid had been overthrown by his son Orion, and that when that had happened, Orion had seized control of Apokolips. But when Superman came here asking, how can I, as a person, right, this individual who's supposed to somehow show these metahumans a better way, what do I do about the ones who don't want a better way? And the response of Orion is, that's the issue that I ran into. When I took over Apokolips and I replaced Darkseid, my thought was that all these people who live on Apokolips would love the idea of freedom. They would love the idea of being able to live their lives as they saw fit. But what I found is that because that's the only life they ever knew, they don't want a different life than that because it's scary, it's fearful. The idea of change, giving them freedom, is something they've never known before. Comfort comes in being a prisoner, right? And so because of that, when I gave them that freedom, they rejected it. They rebuked it. They didn't want to have any of that, right? By just literally getting rid of Darkseid and no leader operating here, they put me in his place because they wanted someone to rule them. They wanted someone to conquer them, right? To control them, to tell them where to go and what to do. Because for us as people, and you can kind of argue by extension, the people on Apokolips, we want to be controlled, right? We want direction. We want to be told, where do you go? Where to go, what to do, how to act. We want to say we don't. We like to say, no, I don't want that. I want to have a life where I can make my own choices and do my own thing and live my life as I see fit. But when push comes to shove and it really comes down to it, a lot of people out there who have the opportunity to forge their own path choose not to because it's scary. It's outside of what they're used to. And if being given the choice between stepping into that box or staying in the box they're in, they'll choose the box they're in. And that's the wisdom that Orion offers here. If what they understand is being conquered, if what humanity and these people understand is being made to do things by force, if what they understand is imprisonment and pain, then give them that. Give them what it is that makes them comfortable. And so while it's not necessarily Superman approaching this from the perspective of we're going to make people suffer, what he does is out there in Kansas, this irradiated wasteland, he starts building a prison. He literally starts building together this giant prison system where all those individuals who stand against him will be housed. And so as the final little bit of this video, what we end up doing is switching over to the Mankind Liberation Front, where you have Lex Luthor effectively telling everybody they've brought someone on board that will essentially help them to change the tide to achieve their goal and effectively eliminate the entire metahuman issue once and for all, allowing humanity to effectively step into the role of being the sole inheritors of the world. And this person is revealed to be Batman, accompanied by Ted Cord and Dinah Lance and Oliver Queen. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.